who has had his work before John and Jane shown at such divergent spaces as the Venice Architectural, and this film was premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival in 2005, and it was released in Bombay as well. It's as a footnote to my introduction, I'd like to recontextualize the film of this curation, which is around the city in cinema. And I was just talking to Osham, and he had some specific responses to it. But before that, Osham, if you could just tell us about how you first landed up on this idea of engaging with the call center with respect to your film watching and living in Bombay, as well as your study in New York.
Yeah, I mean, actually, the thing is that I'm interested in this city. I'm interested in Bombay as a city, and I think that it's really ironic that we make like the number of films that we do in Bombay, and we never engage with the city that we actually live in. And for me, this film is really about the relationship of Bombay, the changing relationship to, of course, America as the kind of aspiration that everyone seems to be kind of moving towards. But I was interested in making a film about call centers, mainly not so much about the business of call centers or business of outsourcing, but about the psychology of what it means to stay up all night and like service American callers and then go through the process of like culturally trying to be like this fake American. And I think the idea of the fake American was very interesting to me, because in some ways I think all of us are becoming fake Americans. And it is kind of symbolic of how the world is changing in a way where wherever you go, any city you go, we have the same kind of mall environment, so the environments are changing. If you looked at cities 50 years ago, they just looked really different. And now when you look at cities, they all look kind of the same, or they're all aspiring to become a kind of single world city. So the idea of sameness and the idea of everyone becoming this sort of same person was interesting to me. And the call center kind of is a space, it's almost like a laboratory where you can see people being designed to become a certain way. And in a way somehow draining their individual cultural interests and streamlining them into a kind of an American being. So that's, for me, the film is much more about it's almost like a science fiction film. It's more about where we are now rather than the call center business or whatever it is.
And before we proceed, perhaps you could just emphasize those subtitles. Are they on all the prints, and why have you put them there?
Okay, well, actually, I mean, of course, as you can imagine, a film like this is quite difficult to solely release or even engage with in just an Indian market. So in many ways, the film, when I made it, I didn't even imagine anybody in India would be interested to watch it, because we seem to like, a different kind of film in India. And I just thought, at that time when I made it and I put it together, I didn't really imagine there would be interest. So a lot of these prints are actually the international prints, so they have the subtitles because, ironically, even after all the language training, people in the West can't understand the English. So the subtitles are just so that people can understand the English. But I thought it's kind of interesting that you have subtitles which are in English and people speaking in English. It just becomes quite ironic about the whole fact that you could train and still there could be a mismatch in terms of people understanding the language. But they're mainly in international prints. So.
And could you talk about the structure of the film and your decision to shoot it on 35 mm? And that it's meant to be a documentary, and it's got this very formalistic agenda to it as well.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people have a question. The first question is it a documentary? What is it? And it is a documentary in the sense that all 6 characters in the film are real. They're real people. They work in call centers. They're real call centers. Everything you see, their mothers, their spaces, what they do, it's all real. So essentially, in that sense, it is a documentary because you're filming people who are playing themselves. I mean, I've had people come up to me after screenings and been like, really good acting, I really like the actors. And I'm like, there's no actors. It's essentially the people that are playing themselves. So, but the idea of documentary also in India has a certain kind of meaning. Documentaries tend to be really kind of didactic, and they're almost very... Many documentaries are very moralistic, like they want to teach you a lesson or something. And I didn't really want to teach anyone a lesson. I just wanted to make a film about a space and about a time and about a transformation that's happening in our country in a way. And So the first question is that I'm interested in the idea of what is a documentary, what is a feature film, what is fiction, what is, I mean, these things are very subjective in a way. If you make a film on video, it's handheld, it looks like a documentary. If I make it on 35 and it's static, all of a sudden it's no longer a documentary. People see it as fiction. That's really strange because the content is the same. It's just the form that's changing. So I really like the idea that if you made a fiction film and it looked really documentary-like, people will assume it's a documentary, and here, vice versa, people assume it's fiction. So I really like playing with the form and the idea that, this whole idea of documentary and fiction actually to begin with is completely false. Because when you shoot a film, you are constructing it. There's no such thing as a documentary. I just come, I turn on a camera, and just reality just happens. That's completely fake, and that's actually a kind of fraudulent thing that a lot of documentary filmmakers do to convince you that, look, I was just there. I just turned on my camera and I got just this piece of reality. But it never works like that, because you frame the shot and you frame out things which are not in the frame, and then you edit the stuff. So you edit out what you don't want and you keep what you want, and it's all manipulated to the point where it's actually fiction. Because what you're doing is you're taking from reality, you're reconstructing it to express what you want. And then you're making it appear like it was just there. But it's not there, because you've manipulated every bit of it. So it's actually fiction. And similarly, fiction is in a strange way documentary, because if you ever see a film, say a fiction film from like the 1920s, you start looking at the costumes, you start looking at what they were wearing, you start looking at other things which have nothing to do with the narrative. And then you're actually seeing a document of that time. So often, like films that we're looking at now, a Shah Rukh Khan film, for example, in 100 years, that becomes a document. It becomes a documentary of the time that we live in. It's not, so what's interesting is documentary and feature and fiction and all these terms, a lot of people don't question what they mean, and I'm interested in what they mean. So that's partly why the film takes on the shape of this kind of odd thing. It's not quite a documentary like you would imagine it to be. In terms of, I'll just quickly tell you how the film is structured. It's basically 6 characters. And I was interested in the idea of transformation. What does it mean to go from being an Indian to being an American? And how could we actually find another way of showing that transformation? If I was not following just one character's life, what if I followed 6 characters? And over the course of 6 characters, I treat them almost like one character. You start with Glenn and Sydney, who really hate the job. They really don't want to work there. By the end, you have a girl, Naomi, who's actually Gujarati, but she's become American. So she's bleached her skin white, she's bleached her hair blonde. And she's totally given in to this kind of American vision of the world. She wants to be American. As the other character says at the end, he says, I don't want to be an Indian anymore. So how do we get from being Indian, in a sense, or whatever that means, to being an American? And that, to me, the film is sort of a transformation. So the first 2 characters really hate the job. The second 2 characters are going through a kind of almost like a religious conversion, where they're getting into the job, they're getting into everything that America represents in many ways, and they're leaving things behind. They're looking at the job as family. They're looking at the job as a missing father. They're looking at the job and the job is fulfilling things which are way beyond the call of duty. They're like, the call center is now becoming a surrogate family space. And then the third set of characters actually are the ones that have completely gone the whole way and have transformed. So actually the structure is very, in one way it looks very difficult or complex, but actually it's quite simple. It's just 3 acts. First, hate the job. Second, transformation. And third, finally loving the job and all it means to be American. So it's really about the Indian becoming John and Jane by the end, and that's really the structure of it.
You also have your characters. So this is a question about the 6 characters that we have. You have them narrating and performing for the camera, but at the same time there seems to be a withdrawal from the dramatic action, so that you're just showing us this transformation, epochal sort of transformation, which is also a discourse on capitalism. And if you could talk a bit more about your choice of using 35 with respect to the way in which the characters and the larger form of the film keep transforming from one to the other. You have cutaways to something that's much larger. And your emphasis in, so coming back to the City Film Festival, on the cityscape, which is this very industrial spaces of Bombay, like Powai. And what interests you about them? Or what interested you when you shot the film?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, okay, so my background is essentially, I'm born and brought up in Bombay, and I left in the 90s. I went to the States to study film in New York and film school. And then I lived there for a while, I worked there, and then I moved back to Bombay in the late 90s, like 2000. And it was really strange because when I moved back, all of a sudden, I felt like America had moved back with me, because when I left much earlier, like 6, 7 years earlier. India was a different India, you know. And I came back, and all of a sudden you had baristas and malls, and things were beginning to open up, multiple channels, and lots of stuff was coming into the country. And for me, the first question really was, how is this changing the city I live in? Like, how is it changing the psychology of people that live and work and you know, exist here? Like, we can't just assume that if you put 100 malls in a space, or you put, you know, you have a certain access given to a lot of people, that there will be no changes. And I think the film, in many ways, I think when there's a character, Nicholas, when he goes into the McDonald's, that was actually shot really early. It was shot 2002. And he goes into the McDonald's at that point, and he gets the free toy. It's a very small moment, but he gets a free toy from the McDonald's guys. Of course, that's just a way of selling the burger or whatever. But he's really fascinated by the toy, because he can't imagine that somebody would give him a free toy. So this interaction between somebody who's never had that experience of capitalism, and he's interacting with a McDonald's vendor for the first time and with his plastic toy for the first time, to me that was a really poignant moment, because now already 2011, you'll never have that moment again. We are already used to having everything. It's already here. So it's a record, it's a document of that moment when, for the first time, we as Indians were having these experiences, we were having these interactions with capitalism in a way, where it was not so comfortable. Well, now it is comfortable. So for me, it was also like a moment that I had to document, because we went from socialist India, one channel of Doordarshan, black and white, and very quickly, over 10 years, we were in another world. So the film is really about that change and that moment. And I think 35, why it was shot on 35, that was actually, again, for me, I mean, I don't think about film as a documentary or fiction or whatever. So it was just, I love 35. And for me, it was like important to make a very cinematic film, which was about the image and about, you know, about, I don't know, I mean, it partly about the image, and partly also, I think 35, when you shoot something on 35, immediately you assume it's fiction. And when you shoot something on documentary, immediately you assume it's on video, you immediately assume it's documentary. So I said, what if you shoot a documentary on 35 and keep the camera static? Would people read that as fiction? You know, so it's also a way of playing with the form in many ways. But I think the imagery of the film, it's interesting, because when I made this, there was no imagery happening in Indian cinema of Bombay. We didn't, very rarely, you'll usually have, if you see like a Ram Gopal Verma film, or you'll have a cutaway of VT station, or you'll have a cutaway of, just to establish Gateway of India or whatever, just to establish that you're in Bombay, even in the early Amitabh Bachchan films or whatever. But there's very little, if you look at Indian cinema, other than the story and the star and all that, there's very little space. There's very little atmosphere of the city, like just a street with no people, with no actors, just a mode. And it's interesting, post John and Jane, I think that you're beginning to see that in films. Like Dhobi Ghat has that a lot, and I think Dhobi Ghat in many ways is quite, I wouldn't say influenced, but definitely attracted to this style of filmmaking. So you see this kind of in the mainstream, you're beginning to see now just a beautiful shot of Bombay, or just an atmospheric shot of Bombay, which you would never have seen 10, 12 years ago in Indian cinema. You would just not see space. There was very little space and city. So for me, the city is a character, and it's important that we kind of treat it as such.
Oshim, so this is a film society, and we have members coming here every weekend to watch films, and I've noticed that you emphasize film watching very deeply. So could you talk, it's a difficult question, but could you attempt to talk about this transformation between the importance of watching film and then when you're making film? How do you go back and forth? because I've noticed that I was watching a film with Oshim, and he doesn't move while watching a film. He just, and I was very impressed. And but how does that transform into filmmaking, or what is the operation one performs on this transformation between watching and making? It's a difficult question, but I'm going to try it.
See, I think when we talk about film in Bombay, which is actually a big film city, it's like we're really talking about different kinds of things. You know, if I talk to somebody about a film, or even another filmmaker about a film, they have a narrative, they have a script, they have stars in mind they want to work with, they want to do a certain kind of thing. I see that it's interesting that you have like a film industry that's as developed as ours. Like you have so much output, but there's so few films that actually stand out. Maybe more now, but you don't see films that really surprise you in terms of how they're made. You kind of almost know when you get into a film, and Bombay is such a mature audience in a way that people get into a film and they already know where it's going to go, because you've seen the thing done so many times in so many different permutations and combinations. You know, whether I'm not going to get into not name names, but you know what I'm saying. Like, you know, you'll have a sub-genre of a genre you've already seen before. And what's interesting is that you actually just have the same film in many ways, or maybe 3 or 4 films that are being remade over and over again. The same 4 films. And you can study almost every bit of Hindi cinema and see that this film is actually a combination of 20% of that film and 30% of that film and 40% of that film. So that's actually an industry process of making films, because you have to recover your money, you have to do all of those things. I just find it a bit sad in a way that we don't have personal films. Like, we don't have enough personal cinema, like where it's about the person who made the film and about a point of view, like the way you would have an author of a book, where it's actually a specific point of view and a specific vision of what a film can be. And I just think that therefore watching films becomes like a sacred act, because what you're doing is you're actually opening yourself up to another way of imagining what a film can be. Because what otherwise happens is that if you go to you come to Cinemax on a normal day, what you would do is you would choose between a Hollywood film and a Bollywood film, which are actually similar. The form is the same. And you're not actually learning anything more about the form. All you're doing is you're going in, you're watching the actor you like perhaps, you're entertaining yourself for that time and you're leaving, but you've actually not experienced a new way of making a film. And I think in many countries, there has been a kind of renaissance. Of course, people talk about Iran, but also China, and also Korea, and also, of course, Japan from the beginning of time, and many parts of Europe and Latin America. But unfortunately, this is happening here very slowly. And it's really unfortunate, because we have such a large filmmaking audience, a film viewing audience, and also filmmaking sort of population. But we just make so many films that look the same. And I think that would change if people watched different kind of cinema. If you sit here and watch different forms of film over the course of, say, a month or whatever, you would have a hard time going back into a normal cinema and just watching a straight-up entertainment film. It just becomes really difficult, because suddenly you've opened up a different way of thinking about the image, or a different way of thinking about how things are edited. Then all of a sudden, when you have 2 people sitting across and there's just a shot, counter shot happening between the 2 of them, and somebody is saying some dialogue, and somebody else is saying some dialogue, then somebody else is saying some dialogue, and then you're cutting to a wide shot, you just start thinking about that as boring. Like, it's just lazy. We could do something more interesting with that, you know? So I just think viewing is like sacred in a way, and that's how you absorb, and that's how you go into cinema with some kind of, in a way, higher consciousness. I don't know, like, I just feel like film is treated very much like television in India, and it's not television. Cinema is like really an amazing experience that can do more than just tell a story that you've already heard before 10 times.
Perhaps you could have some questions from the audience.
I just want to, it's a very interesting film. What I say is that, I was just going to ask, does India have a character? In the sense that you've seen that there's America, and a lot of these boys want to be like Americans, and they love the Americans. They have a thinking in their mind now. Now you see, we have these yoga classes coming on, health conscious coming on, different kinds of foods coming on to this country, which was there about 10 years back, and now we had these malls, which was there, big malls. Used to heard. I have not been to America, but I heard all these stories there. When I see all this, and you are also somehow the other showing that India is almost looking like America in most of the shots and things like that.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering, are we always going to imitate America or the West or whatever you want to go? Has India lost its character in terms of its being? And you also said something, saying, yeah, where have we lost ourselves? It's all looking very plastic. There's some comments.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very valid observation, and I think that was my first. That's what I was saying when I came back from the US, wanting to come back to India. There was no India to come back to because it was already America, right? It was already beginning to become like America, and I'm like, okay, this is great. I can have a coffee, I can have an espresso, and then once you get over that, you start going, but where's the chai guy? Where's the chana wala? He's gone, like it's gone. So I'm just saying that we can like enjoy our so-called modernity, but very quickly we'll get tired of it. Very quickly, like you can already see the Cinemax, which was looking pretty good, like when it opened, is already beginning to look kind of run down. So I'm just saying that all of these things that are shiny and glossy and look beautiful and plastic and you want them when they first come in, 5 years later they're not looking so good. And 10 years later they're looking really depressing. So the point is, but at the same time, I want to say this, and this is something that in a lot of international festivals was the question that I had, and it becomes very easy, like in the Berlin Film Festival, somebody asked me this question that, okay, so if this is, if India is becoming, like many other parts of the world, very Americanized, especially the cities, right? Is there some kind of authentic India to go back to? And we have to be careful about that because the authentic India then sometimes translates into a kind of right-wing India, and a scary India, which is all about, okay, then we are going to go back to pre-Vedic times. But that's also not realistic. We had 200 years of colonialism in between. So India is a very particular historical situation. We are in a strange situation because we've had so many influences. We've had so many, the American influence is, just like the British or the Mughals or the North, moving to whatever. There are waves and waves and waves of influences. The point that I find sad is not so much about India versus America, but about sameness. I think sameness is depressing. If every single person in this room looked identical, all wore the same clothes and all liked the same things, the same food, the same music, we would be in a really kind of post-future space. That would be science fiction. And that's what I worry about, is sameness, where are we losing our individual tastes? Are we losing our individual, people don't know how to tie saris anymore, are we losing our clothing? We used to have headgear in India which would denote what community you're from, what you do, whatever. There's no headgear, there's no, we're all the same. In a way, we're all also part of that. So it's really not so much, like I said, I didn't want to make a film which was like, okay, we should go back to a pure India. That's not the point. The point was just to raise that issue, open that idea of like discussing that and saying, hey, listen, we're having some identity crisis stuff going on here and nobody's talking about it. And we should talk about it and we should engage with it because otherwise we're just sort of very blindly going into something which we're not questioning,
Sharing it with us. Otherwise, I don't know if you would have got a chance to see this. I had missed it when it had released on the screen earlier. I see a whole lot of cinematic influences in this film, which from Wong Kar-wai to, there are a lot of treatments which make it blur between reality and fiction. That's fantastic. That shows that you're not just trying to tell a story, but make it visually rich as well. So that's commendable. What I really wanted to ask is, have you actually taken this film across to call centers to screen it there, and what kind of reactions you've got from them? Because we as outsiders who look at this changing face of India through call centers, through baristas and McDonald's, have a very strange and eerie feeling of what's happening. But these guys who are working there, for them it's a source of livelihood, for them it's life, freedom, liberalization, whatever. So do they actually get it to where it's all heading? And do they, after seeing this film, have you got kind of real stark reactions of almost like self-reflective of what they've been a part of?
Okay, that's actually good. That somebody may do a job, right? And they're in that job because of a economic necessity. They have to do that job because it's an easy job. You don't need to be a graduate, etc. You can get a call center job much faster than other jobs. So this is another question that would keep coming to me, is that don't these people, especially in the West, which is so kind of self-indulgent in a way about poverty, it doesn't understand that on a fundamental level. The question I would always get internationally on the film is, well, why would somebody want to do that job? And I'm like, well, because there's no other options. That's one of the best options you have. So you're in a very complex situation when you make a film like this, because I'm not really judging the individuals in a way. That job is part of the system that you have no choice to. It's not like the government is offering any other options. There's no other space. The space is only privatization. There's no other state, nothing, basically, support for anything. So it's a tricky one. And I think what's interesting about the first character, Glenn, for example, when I met him, I mean, to make this film, we interviewed almost 60 call center people, kids that worked in call centers. And before I shot this film, I spent 1 year just hanging out with people in call centers, really going out, partying with them, you know, literally getting trashed with them, having the entire experience of what it means, like to hang out and engage with this space. And then from those 50, 60 characters, we actually picked 6 that we felt represented a certain kind of space. So before the film was even made, I realized that a lot of the kids that worked in call centers, particularly like guys like Glenn, were very on. They knew exactly how they were being exploited. And they were really interesting, like what he's saying about, I don't know if this is a censored print. Okay, so then he's talking about banging the CEO's wife, sorry to excuse my English or whatever. But I like that because it had so much anger in it, right? But it was also so on. It was also about being exploited. It was about, like, you know, I would just like to tell him this, that I know that I have to do this job because I don't have a choice, but I know what this means. So I just found that amazing. This is a guy who's basically barely graduated from school. And he's fully aware of, I'm getting paid to do this. And there's much more stuff in there which I took out about bathroom breaks. I don't know if you know about call centers and bathroom breaks, but for the longest time, you know, you couldn't go to the loo without putting your hand up with a card. Yeah. And what would happen is if you have 20 guys with their hands up, number 19 it might be like 3 hours later that he gets a chance to go to the loo, you know. So it's actually slave labor on another level, but it's got the sheen of like, oh, we're working in a corporation. We're wearing white shirts. It's very dignified. It's like, and that's what they would tell them in job interviews, that you're working for an American company. But you're not actually working for an American company. These call centers are owned by Indians. It's like a slave ship. It's not really connected to the corporation. So it's the whole thing from the beginning to the end is a lie. It's just total bullshit. It's not like, you know, you come, and of course some kid who's just come, first job out of college, it's going to look really impressive. You have these facilities, you have that. Why do they have creches for mothers? That's so that they can work those insane hours. It's not like they care for your child. They want you to put your child there so you can work for 14 hours. So a lot of people already had an inkling and a vibe about the fact that they were being exploited. They already knew that. Of course, some of the more extreme characters at the end of the film wanted to be exploited. They wanted to be American so bad that they were willing to give all of themselves. So when I did screen the film, of course, for the characters. When they watched it, they were like, it's so boring because this is just us. What's in it? You know, I said, yeah, but for you it's boring. For us, it's not. It's amazing, actually. And then I showed it in call centers, and a lot of the kids really engaged. Yeah, they were totally like, they could immediately be like, and they were quite shocked that I pulled off a film which is so like in your face about it, because I don't care. I'm not really. I had a lot of threats from call centers, like legal notices and all, for years. I mean, I couldn't even show the film here for 5 years or 4 years because I was like. I got a legal letter from Amway, because I talk about Amway. I don't know if you know Amway, but I got a legal letter from like 4 call centers saying that, you know, how can you, because of course I lied and I went in and I said, I'm making a film about the great Indian call center boom. That's how I got access. And then I got in and then I made the film I wanted to make.
The film is pretty neutral. It doesn't take sides. That's the beauty of it. It's just that there could be a lot of people who could get lured by the whole thing, you know, because we are already brainwashed. And there would be a really small segment of people who would really understand what you're trying to say. That's the reason we actually wanted to...
But that segment is growing, you know, funnily enough. Because when the film was first made, most people saw it, they were like, bahut acha hai. It's nice, very, very cool. Like, it's good about how we are American and all. And now, 5 years later, a lot of people are like, oh, that film is really critical or whatever, that film. And I think it does have both sides. I don't want to be dogmatic, like I said. You can take from it what you want, you know. But it did actually upset a lot of call center people because they don't come across looking particularly nice in the film. And yeah, but I did show it to a lot of see, the call center kids are quite different from the guys who actually run these things. Firstly, you never see the guys who run these things. They don't exist. There's no boss. There's no leader. There's nobody. It's just surveillance cameras and drones like sitting in lines in cubicles. There's nobody there. The team leaders are people who are chosen from the employees. So there's nobody to actually catch to say, hey, what are you doing here? There's no boss. That's why it has a very sci-fi quality to it, where it's being managed by somebody somewhere, and you don't know where they are, you know?
I was just wondering, now we are independent, we call ourselves independent, but it is like British ruled us all the years back, and now we are actually very beautifully getting ruled by the Americans.
We like to be ruled, though. We have it in our DNA.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then and now, nothing's changed.
So, I mean, but at least as from an arts point of view, from a cinema point of view, okay, we don't have to necessarily get out on the street and, you know, but I'm saying that shouldn't we as filmmakers or artists or whatever engage with questioning where we are as a society rather than making a Bollywood film that looks like a Hollywood film with the whitest possible person you can find? I don't know. I mean, there's something there, you know. We have to really think about that.
No, my question is answered. Yeah, hi Ashim. Firstly, the gravitas you tried to portray in the film was really commendable, and it was so very vast, so it was really nice. My question is, you tried to, as you're talking about the transformation in the film, transformation of the characters, but the editing was simply cuts. I couldn't see, you know, fade-offs or fade-in as per the mood of the characters. Like, if a character is feeling, you know, sad, as per initially he was feeling good about the job, and then, you know, later on it is coming a little sad about it. I couldn't see any editing part as per to it. I couldn't see the transformation in the editing. So was it intentional, or I mean, what's your take on it?
You're talking about the editing pattern. Yeah, the editing pattern is very confusing because it actually doesn't work with a standard narrative format. So what it does is actually, it's like a deck of cards, it's stacked. So instead of being, like, say, for example, you see a lot of these multi-character films. In a multi-character film, what you would do is you would intercut between characters, and you would have all 6 characters introduced in the beginning, and you would have all 6 characters developing in the middle, and you would have all 6 characters resolving at the end. That's how a multi-character film would be cut normally. What I thought would be more interesting is if you stack them. So what happens is, when you're watching the film at first, you're only watching 2 characters, and you're looking at the film from their point of view. So in a way, a film actually that's, of course, influenced me a lot, and a lot of filmmakers very early on when I was making a film was Rashomon. And Rashomon, because the way of, if you know it, Kurosawa's film, which actually has, you know, a narrative, a story, and then that's told by different points of view throughout the story. Okay, which now people have copied to death. But that was the original film in the 50s that was made, which had different points of view. So I actually wanted, when you first watch the film, to have the point of view of the first 2 characters. So, like, they hate the job. I didn't want to give you any other point of view. I wanted to just have the point of view of those 2 characters that really hate the job, and it's a really hard job and an awful job, and that's your experience of the film. The second 2 characters, when you get into the second part, were actually getting into this very, like, you know, almost like getting into a conversion process. They were getting converted. I wanted to then just stay with the conversion process. So what I didn't want is to make a film where the characters, in a way, are not so important for me in this film. The characters are just a way to carry an idea across. It's really not about the individual character stories. It's much more about going from hating the job to loving the job. And how do you do that in an edit pattern that's conventional? You can't do that. It's just not possible to do that. If you cut it like a normal film, you have all characters running parallel, you could never do that. I wanted to separate the characters into chapters almost. So it is a very, it has almost like an essay style. There are moments where it just goes into city with voiceover. I mean, you know, it's a little bit more like a Chris Marker film or something which is a bit more essayistic. It's not a traditional edit pattern at all. And I think it's very intentional. Yeah, it's very, very intentional.
Anyways, it was really commendable. Very nice.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
I have a quick question. If you could talk about the character of Sydney, and with respect possibly to your new film, Miss Lovely, on the sea film industry in Bombay in the 80s, so getting back to the city, about this discourse on class that you try to bring about. And coming back to this film with respect to the character of Sydney, who wants to be a professional dancer. and you have this stream running through your earlier short films, which we hope to screen someday, and this film, and how you think of class as being related to the city of Bombay.
Yeah, I don't think of Sydney so much as class. I mean, he's not specifically to me representing anything, which is, well, he's a guy who just wants to be a Bollywood dancer. Yeah, basically. I mean, and he works in a call center, so it's quite natural in a way. I've met a lot of people like that. Yeah, I don't know. That's not. But yeah, the film that I'm actually making right now is completely different. It's almost the complete opposite of this. It's a film called Miss Lovely, and it's in Hindi. It's actually pre-globalization, so it's set in Bombay in the 80s. Again, it deals very much with the Bombay, with Bombay, but of a different time. The Bombay, not the Mumbai, and not the post-global Mumbai. And it's about basically two brothers that make like really cheap sex horror films for small towns, like, you know, Shaitani Ilaka or whatever, like lots of that kind of stuff. And it's really very much not in the sterile space, but very much in this sort of underbelly of Bollywood. It's like the really, I don't even know how to describe it. It's really the dirty bits of Bollywood actually, and it's quite a realistic, very different from this, like almost a complete flip, and very much dealing with fiction. But that's fiction where I've cast a lot of people who are actually from the C-grade industry to play themselves. So they're playing themselves. So there it's documentary in another way, but it's scripted and it's got actors and all of that. So just a different way of.
And about the notion of a filmmaker who can transform from. You often talk about how a filmmaker should transform from one genre to another.
Yeah. See, I don't really like. I'm not really. We talk about this. Devdutt really loves art cinema. I mean, especially contemporary art cinema. I'm not so this thing about like art versus commerce. I find interesting films anywhere. There's some like really bizarre B.K. Adarsh films from like the 1970s, which have some kind of weird, you know, there's like a film like Naya Nasha, which you guys should look up if you can, about a housewife, a regular housewife who discovers LSD, and she starts doing drugs, but she's in a conventional, and this is, I don't even know, this is a conventional actress, I don't remember who, but it's very bizarre as a film. And it's not actually, it looks like a Bollywood film, but it's really odd and very interesting. So there are also within the mainstream some very odd films that have been made accidentally or for whatever reason that actually fascinate me. It's not just that I'm interested in art cinema or only Wong Kar-wai or whatever. I'm also interested in a lot of B movies and like really bad stuff and or like B Subhash stuff, Disco Dancer, stuff like that. You know, I like films that have tried to do something different, just get away from the form that was like the dominant form. So, yeah.
Hi, Oshim. Just one question. When you were looking around for your characters, didn't you find anyone who appreciated the system of creches and the facilities provided at the call centers? You've just not touched on all these topics because I worked at a call center for 17 months, and no matter what, you don't have Indian companies that, you know, provide you a sick room. So why wouldn't you touch on all these topics?
But the second set of characters really appreciate the call center.
See, they appreciate the fact of the family bit and stuff, but they don't really appreciate the facilities. So why not something on that?
I think my first question about facilities is that I think it's fine to talk about facilities, but then what about the idea of like a 12-hour workday? I mean, why is that?
If you're working at a media house, you're anyway working 12 hours. Most media houses don't even have drops, pickups. Call centers have that. So.
But that's because of the night shift, right? It's unsafe.
Yeah, you're working at a media house at times till like midnight, 1, and you got to take a cab. You're not given drops or anything. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think I see your point in terms of the idea of the American thing, but a lot of those things are legal, you know that, right? They're not things that necessarily would be provided. It's because a US company is connected to it and they have to follow US legal laws about working mothers, etc. It's not like they're really... What I'm saying is that there are certain things, and I agree with you, partly because I think that there are facilities provided, but I'm questioning the reason why those facilities are provided. And the fact that those facilities are provided to me doesn't show any benevolence. It doesn't make it seem like the industry is very kind, because I see spaces where they can exploit people where they do, right? I mean, we're talking about loo breaks, right? I'm just saying that there are spaces, also in terms of if you talk to people about abusive calls, and that's something that in the US you would never allow, like where people just call and are like having a racist rant against Indians about something else. There is no, you're supposed to smile and just drop the call in a very cool way.
But Oshim, I think that would be the case for any multinational that's there in India. I mean, I work at a media house now, and I know of these companies, and they've got their British heads in India, and no matter what, it may not be a call center, but everyone under the British head has to kind of behave in the same manner.
But yeah, but I wouldn't justify that any more than I would justify call centers. It just happens to be that there's call centers in the film. If we were talking about something else, I probably would see that there too. But I think one doesn't necessarily excuse the other. That's kind of what I'm saying. I think that I agree there are facilities and all that, but I think we can get caught up in that. Like we can, and a lot of people have done that. Like, wow, I get the creche. Okay, but you also get these 20 other things which are slightly problematic, no? So I'm just saying that there has to be a balance. I agree. See, we're looking at also companies. We're not saying that Indian companies are actually, Indian companies are even more exploitative. That's what I was saying to begin with, that the situation is so bad and the options are so limited that when you get a pickup, you feel like somebody has blessed you, you know what I'm saying? But that should be a given, yeah? No?
Thanks. Well, I am another person who has a call center job.
Yeah.
And to be frank, it's a pretty stupid job. We do it because of the money.
Yeah.
And the facilities, which are certainly better than the ones provided by the Indian companies, or just so that they can, make more profits. It's simply kind of a carrot and stick. Just like they give more money for better services, better quality, they give better facilities. So it's not a big deal. However, I see this, the whole movie. I like the movie, love the movie, absolutely brilliant and very authentic. And thank you for being not condescending towards call center employees. That's fantastic. However, do you think there is quite a bit of, it's a very, very ideological film, anti-capitalist, to be, very frank. And I am a person who has, been anti-capitalist when I was young, which was a very, very long time ago. But now, do you think, or I don't know whether you agree, when you look at, let's say, India, where you see the stupid malls and people, going there like a herd of buffaloes, have nothing better to do, don't have, too much of a concept of culture. But when you compare this with a country like Pakistan, where there is more of tradition, less of modernity, and they seem to be going down the drain in a different manner, much more scary. For example, you mentioned the right wing in India, which was scary until recently. But when you look at what happened to that Salman, what's his name, Tausir, and the other guy, the minorities minister in Pakistan, it looks like, things may be slightly better. I'm just wondering whether overall you might have if you make a film like this now, this kind of, would you still have an ideological slant saying that, about what I'm trying to say here is maybe capitalism is not all that great. It's maybe a very exploitative philosophy. But at the end of the day, nothing seems to be, working, which is better.
Yeah, no, I think that's partly the reason why the film has this form. I think that you start with people who hate it and you end with people who love it. So in a way, you have the whole spectrum. Just two things that I think your point brings up. One is, okay, so you have this as one option, and then you have another option, which is, say, a more right-wing India, where we all go back to a certain kind of pre-history. Like we say, okay, we're going to go back to when we were authentic, pre-colonial, pre-whatever, which to me is absolutely ridiculous. And as you can see in Pakistan and elsewhere, it doesn't work. It's just it's a fantasy of some former time when we had glory, etc., which doesn't exist as far as I'm concerned. It's a fantasy. So that's not really an option to me at all. I think the film, to me, what it does is it's not so much about I don't think it's anti-capitalist. In fact, it's funny because when I've shown this at documentary festivals, especially with serious left-wing types in the audience, they're irate. They hate the film. They hate the film because they think I'm excusing America. They're like, this film is not angry enough. Like you were saying, it's not ideological enough. It should it should be very clearly stating that these things are bad. And I'm like, but I don't think that, because I'm also going to a mall. I'm also consuming. So actually this film is more about questions. It's not really about answers. It's about the questions you're asking or the questions I'm asking, or what we were talking about, this idea that you have a crash in a call center. So is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I don't know. I think that I'm just talking about a film that actually is just questioning and asking basic questions about who we are. And I'm just saying that to me, if that what is what it does, then it's good enough, you know. It's just a question about really it's just a film about just saying who is an Indian? What is an Indian now in 2011? Who is an Indian? And just opening up these things for just questioning. It's not a resolution of any kind. You know, so that's really what I want to attempt to do. I don't want to be like, okay, it's terrible, we should not go to malls, we should just, you know, be wearing kurta pajamas. And that's not the idea. The idea is just to open up a possibility to discuss our identity now as Indians. Like, what are we? Who are we? And can we have these conversations internally amongst ourselves, you know? That's really what the film is meant to do. I don't have any answers, actually, on a lot of these things.
I'll just kind of add to that. It was very funny when President Obama was visiting India. A lot of people went anti and what the hell, and he's coming and he's going to, you know, fool us and this. So there was a whole lot of debate on Facebook when they say that, listen, you are okay in wearing Levi's denims, but you don't want America coming shopping in India. So I guess it's
like confusing.
Said,
yeah, it's
exactly.
really confusing. I mean, I don't know. I'm wearing jeans and I'm not feeling necessarily pro-American today. You know what I'm saying? It's just confusing. That's what I'm saying. This film's all about that schizophrenia. We're half American. We want to be. We don't want to be. We're like, it's a crazy time, and that time should be documented, and that time should be discussed. That's all I'm saying.
We'll have to stop. Perhaps we can have one last question.
What I feel is that in a city like Bombay, you have pockets of all kinds, very much Indian people, or whom you can call not just poor Indian, then very much modern or very much westernized people. Here you have purposely or maybe with efforts, you have tried not to show Indian aspect. Wherever there was possible to like have voices in Marathi or any other language, you have avoided purposely. So you have tried to show the pocket which is like going westernized way. So that is, I think it's a very small pocket, maybe a very big pocket among ourselves, but not such a big pocket as far as the city is concerned. That's what I feel. I may be very wrong.
I think that's a very valid point. I mean, it's very selective, but the reason why it has to be selective is for you to actually see it. So for me to actually get you to see something, I have to selectively, and that's the first thing that people ask internationally, why is there no India in this film? Why is there no India? Why are there no Indian languages? Why is there no? Because I'm like, well, this is also a part of India. And we can't forget that a lot of the spaces that we occupy are being absorbed by this. Having said that, I don't think it's that small, because if you look at it from 20 years ago, look at the media, for example. That's going out to every village in India, right? If you look at just the media, or you just look at the way we are perceiving ourselves in our films, even in our Hindi films, it's changed a lot actually in the last 15 years. So I would say it's maybe a small pocket now, but it's almost like this film is in a way, it's trying to look at it as prophecy for the next 50 years. The end of the film is supposed to be almost like India in 50 years. It's not meant to be literal. It's meant to be symbolic of where we could be. A blonde woman looking for a blonde guy in an Indian nightclub, I mean, it's bizarre. But so for me, there's elements of science fiction. It's extending the idea out into what if we really took this line of thinking, where could we end up? That's basically what it is. So yeah.
All right, we'll have to end it there. We'd like to thank Oshim for being here, and we would do that by presenting a selection of 3 of our film noirs.
Oh, thank you. Thanks a lot for coming. Thank you for asking so many questions. Great.
Yeah, and also we're going to release this film on DVD next month.
Ah, great. Thank you.
And it will be available in the market.
Super.
So, and thanks for coming, guys. Thank you. It was a great afternoon. Thank you.
you get recovered its money. I mean, in terms of, it's not like a bad thing to make an interesting film because you can make your money back.
I want to make something like this. Let's say you want my
Totally.
How much does it cost? Suppose if
This cost me 30 lakhs.
I often Puri, the
Yeah.
There's this guy who made this film on a Rajnikant fan who used to run a video parlor in Matunga. You must see that
Yeah,
film
check it
because
out.
it's again about a era where all these things were quite popular, accepted, part of the milieu, part of the cityscape, and now it's kind of, police used to raid them and take off
My
their
film is
shags
all
and-
about that. It's
So
really about
it
that
just
time.
means that
Well, that's my time. I'm 38. I grew up.
I'm
in-
35, so
I
I
grew up in
connect.
Chaya Geet, man. That was the thing. So I have to think about that in terms of where India is now. It's changed.
And I'm so glad that Enlighten's releasing
Yeah,
it so
it's
more
great.
people can
It's
see
really
it
great.
because I guess.
When is your next film?
Okay. Off track.